Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Biscayne Summit. My name is Laura Dominguez, and I'm Vice Mayor for the City of Miami Beach. We're one of the sponsors again this year, and we're very excited for the upcoming panel. Now, in the City of Miami Beach, we do spend a lot of funds and allocate them for water quality. We have a water contractor that each year picks up 78,000 pounds of trash in our waterways. And we also have nonprofit organizations that make it their mission to set up cleanups and make sure that our beaches and waterways are also clear and free of debris. We spend millions of dollars, upwards of over $30 million coming up in the next 5 years on our stormwater master plan to ensure that everything is up to date and moving well. While 90% of our, or 95% of our seawalls are private, all of the public seawalls, we've been working on investing money in raising the seawalls, and any that are around our parks. We've created a living shoreline in conjunction with our seawalls. If any of you have not visited Brittany Park in Miami Beach, you really should look it up and take a peek, because it's really beautiful and a great way that we've used nature to be part of our solution when it comes to resiliency. And so I'm very excited to introduce Daniel Kleinman. He is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Seaworthy Collective. And if all of the panelists will also come onto the stage, you're in for a really good panel and discussion, and I wish you much success for the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much. All right. Anya, Silvio, and Helen, you guys want to come on up, and we'll go down the line 10 minutes at a time. We'll try to be efficient here. Hopefully we don't run things further behind. No, it's all good. Traffic. My name is Daniel Kleinman. I'm the founder and CEO of Seaworthy Collective. We're a local nonprofit entrepreneur support organization, or incubator, accelerator, and community serving entrepreneurs in ocean and climate impact, or as we like to say, blue tech. And I love to start this talk by helping kind of bridge a lot of the worlds that are happening in ocean impact. I think you hear a lot, especially in the main room, about a lot of the, I would say, more traditional ocean impact work happening in conservation, restoration, policy. But I'm really excited for this room because this is truly about how we create scalable solutions and think a little bit differently and go against the stream, if you will, on what convention in ocean impact looks like. And then even thinking a little bigger, when we talk about climate change, we largely think a lot about planting trees, but the ocean is our greatest asset against climate change, storing the most heat and carbon on our planet. And so I love to say it's our opportunity to help balance the terrestrial bias we have in climate by prioritizing ocean-based climate impact solutions. And just to share a little bit about my journey and what's led me to being here today and sharing with you, I got to see firsthand this lack of opportunity to do ocean and climate impact work as a marine roboticist. I was working at Woods Hole Oceanographic, to an MIT spinout, and then for the Navy. And all throughout my career, I saw just how limited the private sector offering was for creating a meaningful impact. And there's a perspective we have at Seaworthy that's really about calling out kind of these systemic barriers to ocean and climate impact, but really participation in the blue economy. First one is funding, which I think a lot of us already know. But out of all the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 14, Life Below Water, is the least funded at just 0.01%. And so that has to change, obviously, first before anything else. But even if we look at the private sector, as I mentioned from my own experience, we see there's a study back in 2021 called the Ocean 100 that characterized the top 100 corporations making up the majority of the blue economy, or the ocean economy. And no surprise, 9 out of the top 10 companies were fossil fuel companies, and the overall majority of those top 100 were fossil fuel and defense companies. And so it's no surprise that innovation in service of our planet isn't coming out of the status quo blue economy. And then lastly, we see this lack of thinking outside of the box when it comes to ocean impact. Academia primarily really introduces people to a lot of what has been, as far as going into public sector, going into research, rather than these new emerging opportunities in the blue economy. And the reality is there are more degrees than there are jobs in the marine sciences if we don't change that paradigm. And so all of this is a cry for a need for a new path, an additional path that not only is more accessible and full of more opportunities, but is actually more efficient and effective at creating the impact we all want to see for our oceans and climate. And so the last thing I'd love to share before getting into what we do at Seaworthy is this framework called the 6 conditions that hold systemic problems in place. I love this framework because it really highlights a lot of the traditional thinking behind the work happening in ocean impact that's very top-down heavy, right? Focusing on things like policies or more sustainable practices, and as I mentioned, resource flows, AKA finance. And this top-down approach has not moved the needle far enough or fast enough. And I can go through the litany of facts and depress you guys on the state of the ocean, but we don't need to do that. We need to talk about solutions here. But this problem is really what inspired me to start Seaworthy Collective. At Seaworthy, our mission is to bring all hands on deck for blue tech. And what that means is making ocean and climate impact innovation, or blue tech as we like to call it, accessible and inclusive. As we mentioned, we are past the point of climate change. It is a changed climate, and our oceans are also overexploited, with 90% of fish stocks being exploited, overexploited, or depleted globally. And so we see these challenges exponentially growing, and yet the solutions that we philanthropically fund historically, at best have been mitigative. And so we need to think bigger about how we create this not only future of impact, but really future of work to enable a regenerative blue economy. And I'll share more about that in a moment. But first, it really starts by flipping our perspective on the historic top-down approach we've taken in the blue economy, and we're instead working from the bottom up. And so at Seaworthy, we see that first and foremost being community building and as well as providing education and support. And all of that enables us to shift mental models and challenge, do you need a marine science degree or PhD to be in this space? Maybe not. It really is an interdisciplinary opportunity, which I'm sure you'll hear more later. And so our community programs engage people both virtually and in person. We've hosted the Climate Happy Hour now with many partners locally, but also we have panel events featuring both founders and leaders across our network. But then raising awareness, that is kind of also status quo in a lot of ways in nonprofit. The question is, then what? We make people aware of the problem, but how do we actually lead them to tangible opportunity? And for us, that's through our startup programs. We offer access to critical relationships and connections that give people the confidence to take the leap into ocean and climate impact entrepreneurship. And then most importantly, the opportunity to shift power dynamics and show that they can be part of this emerging new economy by actually getting the support they need to commercialize their solution. And so we support entrepreneurs with a long list of opportunities, but largely, connecting to our global community with over 2,200 members globally, our network of over 250 mentors and collaborators, 12 weeks, week in and week out of one-on-one support, as well as access to a global investor network of over $1 billion under management through our partnership as part of the 1,000 Ocean Startups Coalition. Altogether, when we think about this pipeline of innovation, right, it starts by, we look at ourselves as the top of the funnel, right? And it starts by how do we help encourage all these early stage ideas so that we can enable the flow of innovation needed so that we can get to that end of the spectrum with scalable solutions, which you'll hear some of today. But when we think about one side of the opportunities, one of the programs we're actually just spinning up this summer is a fellowship program with Miami-Dade College. Miami-Dade College has no history or no oceanographic research attached to their institution, but in just 1 hour, we were able to get their students prototyping their own blue tech startups, helping them go from not even knowing what coastal resilience was to thinking about things like planting seagrass with robots. It's amazing what happens when you start to challenge people's, challenge people's perspectives on what they can do in this space. On the other end of the spectrum, conveniently enough, Anya over here is a great example of what it looks like. We didn't plan this, by the way, of what it looks like for people to come from untraditional backgrounds and do this work. Anya, I won't spoil her whole story, but she was a former lawyer, and to me is such a representation of the interdisciplinary future of this space. And as we love to both share, we were the first to get to support her on her journey in kind designs. And I'll fast forward past her slide so I don't spoil what she has to present. But Anya is just one of now 33 startups we've supported out of a global building wave of over 300 startups we've seen in the blue economy. And if you don't know, the blue economy is projected to double by the end of the decade to over $1.5 trillion a year. And at the same time, We're also part of a NOAA grant called the Ocean-Based Climate Resilience Accelerators that came out of the $2.6 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act that the government is actively investing in this space, seeing true momentum for the future of the blue economy right here in South Florida. But all of this is really to emphasize that we don't just see things as traditional sustainability, right? It's rooted in mitigation, right? Offsetting, doing as much harm as we're doing good. If we're going to solve these massive problems, we have to think bigger. And how do we build systems of solutions rather than just one-offs that exist in silos? And that's truly taking a regenerative approach that solves problems at their root. And so through our partnership with the 1,000 Ocean Startups Coalition, there's a great report called the Ocean Impact Navigator. I highly recommend to anyone to take a read. These are the 5 verticals that globally we see in the blue economy with positive socioeconomic outcomes, cross-cutting, all of them. But at Seaworthy, we focus on 3 of these: greenhouse gas reduction and removal, pollution, upstream and downstream plastic and nutrient pollution, as well as coastal resilience and adaptation, which altogether make up about 1/3 of the blue economy. And to date, we've supported 33 startups since 2021 from all over the world, although we've seen a growing ecosystem locally that I'll share some facts on later. But most importantly, we've also seen recognition and true reinforcement of the work we're doing locally from NOAA to the Department of Energy, as well as the SBA, who supported our work with Miami-Dade College, even to the Prince of Monaco with his prize for innovative philanthropy. But ultimately, we're a social impact venture first. And that's one of the key takeaways I want to share is the problem we have in blue tech isn't just a technology problem, it's truly a social impact problem. How do we make this space accessible and inclusive? And for us, we're really proud to say that out of the 67 founders we've supported to date, 67% of them have come from underrepresented backgrounds, either female or minority backgrounds. And our goal is to hit over 100 by the end of next year. But altogether, just to help summarize our approach and lead to some great takeaways and hopefully tie-ins with what you'll hear from my colleagues up here, I want to emphasize what does this bottom-up approach look like? And I think you'll again hear that as we go through today. It starts with community building, right? We are raising awareness, but then taking action by actually getting involved in building, co-creating, and growing solutions. But then most importantly, and this is the key opportunity, is building regional innovation ecosystems. The reality is, not all of this innovation is going to happen in Silicon Valley, right? We need to show that it can happen here, especially as we are the epicenter of impacts of rising sea levels and climate change. And so we're building that ecosystem for enabling ocean and climate impact innovation. And then only then will we see the outcomes that we're looking for in making this space more accessible and inclusive and social impact, the economic impact of creating jobs and building a local economy, and of course, the environmental impact of regenerating our environment. But most of all, there's a systemic outcome, and this is what I'm most proud of. In our first 2 cohorts, we had 20 to 30% local representation. Again, there really wasn't much of an ecosystem for doing innovation in blue economy work historically in South Florida. In our last 2 cohorts, including our most recent one that's ending this week, which I'll share the invite to our startup showcase at the end of this presentation, we've had majority local representation. We've literally seen the local ecosystem grow just in the last 3 years from a fraction of the startups we support to the majority, and that is competing with startups globally. And that just goes to show what the potential we have here in South Florida is, which again, you'll hear more of from our fellow colleagues here. But to wrap up, when we think about making these opportunities to go against this traditional stream in ocean impact more accessible and inclusive, we can truly unlock the untapped talent and ideas that we need to help solve these exponential problems and create amazing businesses doing it. And so my call to action for all of you on all different levels, starting from the bottom, of course, is even if you don't think you have anything to give to this space, everyone has something to provide to the community. A lot of us are underfunded and understaffed and can use volunteers, just as one great example. But if you're ready to take that leap, we're here to help support you in either co-creating or growing your solution. And if you're a funder, think bigger than just supporting individual solutions and think about how you can enable developing our growing ecosystem by supporting us and other entrepreneur support organizations here who are doing really critical work for, as you'll hear, some amazing innovators locally. And so I want to close by saying thank you again to the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit for having us, and at the same time inviting all of you for this Thursday. We have our startup showcase at Ampersand Studios at 6 p.m. with our latest cohort of 7 startups, 4 of them being local. If you want to meet local innovators, which we have some in the audience here, shout out to Yadi and Anya, who are doing incredible solutions. I really encourage you to be there. And I look forward to hopefully chatting with you all and seeing you there. Thank you so much. I think, you want to hand off? Yep. Or I was going to say, do you want to do questions at the end? Okay. All right. Well, as they change presentations here, it is my honor and privilege to introduce Silvio Pupo, the founder and CEO of Logos Blue Foundation, Logos Capital. I can laundry list more, but I'll leave it there. Thank you, brother.
Wow. You know, it feels like it was just yesterday that I first got a call from Daniel Kleinman. He was moving to Miami. He was excited about this vision that he had when he was at UM. And I was like, man, you know, I share that same vision. So it's so good to see you doing the work. Fast forward 3-4 years later now to see like how much progress you've made. And it's, you know, one of the things that I want to emphasize here, I've been working and trying to solve these issues, systemic issues, 12 years. And having and you need to do both. You need to do top down, like Daniel talked about, and you need to do bottom up. And I've been doing both for 12 years, and it's been very, very, very tiring, especially the community work. So I'm very grateful that you've been able to step in to Miami, the community I love, and handle the community with so much love and care and dedication, and pour your heart and soul into everything, you know. So we appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Personally, thank you so much. So my name's Silvio. I'm born and raised in Miami. I started the Logos Blue Economy Foundation in 2020. I'll talk a little bit about that. Here's a disclaimer. So if anybody's recording, make sure you record that. This is my vision of Biscayne Bay. So I got into finance, but really I'm a creative. I'm a philosopher. I'm an artist. I'm a poet. And unless you know me, you don't really know that about me. And that's why it's really tough for people to understand, well, are you a banker? Are you working in society? Are you doing art? What are you doing? Well, the truth is systems change requires all of these things, especially if you want to build something as beautiful as this. So I'm going to talk about, just to be brief, because we only have 10 minutes, I'll spare you the details of my philosophy. Just jump straight into blue bonds, the promise for blue bonds, what they are, the obstacles we have, the case for blue bonds, and how I think it can help protect our largest treasure and our largest economic driver. So like I mentioned, we started Logos Capital and my support of other Blue Economy members in the local community, people like Scarlett Arana, Stephen Rodan, which was at NASA and was just starting Charm Robotics back then, and us sort of got together to figure out, you know, how can we do more to solve some of these issues, and also to shout out to the superheroes like Allison and Albert and everybody else here that's in the room that works so hard. I think it's just so nice to see some friendly faces, but new faces, luckily. The benefits of co-investing in the blue economy also, just from like a banker's perspective or an economist's perspective, are multiplied, right? Are multifold. So if you can see in this slide here, right, investing in SDG 14 has an outsized impact on just about all the other sustainable development goals as well. If you don't know what the who knows what the sustainable development goals are? Okay, good. If you don't know, let's talk after this. You know, and this is a $2.5 trillion funding gap that we need just in terms of developing or investment into developing markets. This does not include, so these are from many old presentations I put together, but this is really, it's a $275 trillion funding gap we have to solve for. Green bonds and blue bonds being one of the largest markets in the industry, multi-trillion-dollar market, I think can help solve that. And in fact, we have to use this to solve that. But what are they? Well, they're just like every other financial instrument, only that they're actually a subcategory of green bonds. And green bonds means that you're going to take a pledge to report how you're using your money and to put your money towards green impact projects. In the case of Biscayne Bay, towards restoring the bay, restoring our watershed, or some other solution. I only got a couple minutes already, so there you go for my philosophical banter. So why Florida? Well, Florida, you know, has a lot of assets and industry. It means we're basically an island surrounded in terms of the blue economy. We'll get into these other reasons, but again, for the meaning of time, I want to really show you here. This talks about the different flavors of capital. So on the far left, you have like philanthropic capital, and in the middle, you have debt, like where the bonds would be, and then here in the left, you have equity. So blue bonds basically would be the most adequate if you look at this section here in the bottom left, the most adequate to help solve most of our challenges in the blue economy. And the idea is not to talk about the sustainable development goals, but to go beyond sustainability towards regeneration, the regenerative development goals, to protect the $74 billion in assets that we have, right? We have tools like natural capital and the natural capital economy that we can use to back these bonds with real assets like mangroves, for example. And we can use natural capital and natural capital accounting. And this is not something I've made up, something that the UN has been working on. And by the way, we had our own capital accounts since the 1950s in the US. They were defunded by the USGS, and we have yet to fund them again, but it's picked up in the rest of the world. So my goal is to combine art and use technology and regeneration and this philosophy for regenerative finance, what we call refi. Better data creates better investments. Our goal is if these mangroves to be able to then connect the data, prove that we can raise money. For example, in Denver, we were able to raise $12 million just within an hour by issuing mini bonds. The community can put their money where their mouth is and get things done a lot faster than waiting for anybody else. And this sort of gets the momentum going. And the vision that I have for blue bonds, and that we've been doing a lot of research at the Blue Economy Foundation together with other partners like the Open Earth, is figuring out ways to stack multiple benefits like carbon credits or blue carbon, social credits, plastics credits, biodiversity credits that can be partitioned. And in a place like the Bay, where you have volumetric designs, being able to have different areas of the Bay that can qualify for multiple types of credit, not just blue carbon, not just marine, not just biodiversity. That's just something that Anya, for example, was been doing different research and heard people tell her that it can't be done, but we have a methodology to get it done. And part of it is working on the data. So we have Logos Capital has investments and patents and solutions that connect the sensor data to the financial instruments. And we use those financial instruments to link and mint the blue carbon credits, the marine biodiversity credits, the plastics credits, the eutrophication credit for cleaning up the assets. And it can be backed by a mangrove. In fact, we should have a statewide mangrove bond or resilience bond, because in Florida, you can't have a green bond. It's illegal because of state preemption, which is our largest obstacle. But in the case of Bermuda, $500 million of refinancing, 30 to 50 basis points is creating over $100 million in savings over the life of that bond, right? We can invest that into nature-based solutions. If you put that $1, for example, into the marine economy, right, that gives you, maybe over 500 million, around $700 million if you put living shorelines, for example, an economic benefit. And now that is an example of regenerative economics. We do something, we do the engineering, and now the outcome of economic value that we've gained is way beyond not just the monetary savings, but also the social and governance and environmental. Anyways, this is Silvio speaking, coming to you live from Miami. Next, thank you so much. My contact information is here.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen. I'm so happy to be here this morning and to be speaking, amongst a great group of folks over here. So today I'm going to be speaking to you about the role of businesses for the future of Biscayne Bay. So I work for a company called Ballyhoo Media. We are the nation's largest waterway media advertisers. And for Ballyhoo Media, I'm the Director of Communications and Public Affairs, where I also have the honor of overseeing all of our environmental initiatives. Talk a little bit more about that. So why we're all here today? Biscayne Bay is the economy, $64 billion. That's the number that was produced by the county's recent report on the impact of the Bay. Why is this so important? Biscayne Bay directly impacts just about every business in South Florida. I know I speak for many when I say that our business is directly impacted by the tourism industry. So when we care about the Bay, it really comes back to care for us. So many folks come to South Florida for our pristine beaches, for our bay, for fishing, boating, snorkeling, our culture. And it's up to all of us really to make sure that the bay is healthy. Something that folks may not know, people travel around the world internationally just to study our Everglades system. It's something that we take for granted, but it's something that, provides our daily fresh drinking water, and making sure that we're protecting our natural resources is just so important, not just for tourism industry, but for our local benefit. Okay, so how do we make sure that we're protecting the bay? We have to understand the challenges. And what are those challenges, both on the human level, on the industrial level? I'm going to name a few: septic tanks, fertilizer, pet waste, sewage leaks, litter, grease, construction activity, especially with rainy season. Anything that's out there can end up in the bay. Unfortunately, infrastructure isn't always enough. And with that, we always have to make sure that we're stopping pollution at the source. And so with that, I'm going to introduce a term that some of you may be familiar with, which is corporate social responsibility. What is it? It's a concept that businesses have a responsibility to do good and to contribute to the local community and societal goals. It's something that at our company, at Ballyhoo Media, we preach on a daily level. We know the significance of the bay. We know the significance of the waters to our company. And so we make sure that as we're operating, we're doing our part in making sure that we're giving back as often as we can. And so what's in it for businesses? Something that I think we all have to be very, it has to be top of mind is, we all want to make sure that we're making an impact. It's not always feasible. At the end of the day, if you're a small business, you're worried about your bottom line. You're worried about bringing food to the table. It may not be that important to you to invest in, what you think are lofty goals for ensuring that we're protecting the bay. And so what's in it for businesses? I'm going to provide a few stats that may surprise you. So 79% of investors, according to the PwC, consider environmental sustainability goals when they're investing in companies. 38% of employees are more likely to stay loyal to a company that prioritizes sustainability. 66% of global consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable goods. And I can go on and list different reasons why it's important. But as you can see, there are plenty of benefits to the employer, the consumer, and on the investor level for wanting to promote environmental initiatives. Okay, so what can your business do? There are different things that every business can do. At the start, I would say an audit. Audits are important. Looking into your own infrastructure, your own business practices. The county released a study that says there's over 120,000 commercial and private entities that still have septic systems. We know that these septic systems, if they're not taken care of, it can directly impact our groundwater, directly impact pollutants entering the bay. So making sure that you're taking an internal audit of what's going on at your business. In addition to that, what are the practices? Fertilizer. We know that during the rainy season, fertilizer doesn't really do anything. So making sure that you're talking to your landscapers, not using fertilizer, not just at home, but at your businesses, because all of that can enter the bay. In addition to that, cleanups. So something pretty, pretty low, not something that you have to invest too much in, but doing cleanups as an organization, that's something that we do. And also just sponsorships. If you can, monetary contributions or in-kind contributions to help local efforts, partnering with the county, partnering with different groups. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about us as a company. Again, at Ballyhoo Media, we operate along the waterways, so water is very important to us. It's our ethos to make sure that we're protecting the communities that we serve. And so with that, we make sure that we leverage our advertising dollars to support scientific studies, to support environmental community activities, and more with the environment in mind. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit about those programs. To date, we've invested $1.5 million in-kind advertising dollars to go towards nonprofits, both at the national level, international, and local. In addition, we have 3 programs that I'm really happy about. Blue Beacon, so that's our our tangible environmental efforts. So we invest in scientific studies, we invest in water testing cleanups every quarter, and also into someone mentioned the United Nations sustainability goals, but ocean floor mapping. So I'll get to that in a second. We also have our SEA program, like I mentioned, so our coastal communication efforts and amplifying PSAs and things are important in protecting our environment. And lastly, our reef program, which is all about sustainability at every event that we operate in. So making sure that we're held accountable. We partner with nonprofits to make sure that, is there composting? Are your vendors not using plastic? Things like that that make sure that we're leaving places better than how we find them. Okay. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about one specific instance that we had as a company and how the water quality directly was about to impact major event that we had. So we partnered last year with a national movie studio. They were going to premiere a movie here in Miami-Dade County on the waters at one of our local state parks. So this was a great opportunity to highlight our state park system, work with our state parks. Again, always making sure that we're leaving the area better than how we find it. But in this case, a few days leading into the event, the water quality came back with very high levels of bacteria. It was unsafe for folks to go into the water, which was the main point of this event. That's not great news, not just for, event aside, it's not great for our state park. This event had an opportunity to reach nationwide, highlight our park system, highlight our local bay. And it had now, potentially the consequence of ruining brand reputation for not just the movie studio, the movie, but our local community. Very thankfully, and just to talk a little bit about the impact there, 20 different vendors, all locals, were part of this. Obviously, months of planning, and again, the national brand recognition for this event. I think it was nearly $100,000 went into this from the studio level, so it's definitely something that would have greatly impacted, their reputation. Thankfully, the day before the event, the day of the event, and then 2 days leading to the event, water quality came back fine. We were able to proceed as we wanted to, but it just shows that water quality can directly impact the Bay very quickly, can directly impact businesses. And obviously, if you're trying to have a good time with your family going to our state park system. What's the solution here? Solution is not, it's not up to one company, it's not up to one person. It really is a local effort to make sure that we're all doing our part to promote water quality. So just a few examples of some of the things that we do. Like I mentioned, working with national nonprofits, so in this case, Oceana. Next, we do quarterly cleanups in our community. That's something that's really important to us as a company. To date, we've collected over 2 tons of trash from ending up in the bay, something that we're really proud of. And then we're also always trying to move the needle. So something that folks don't know is every day that we're out there in the bay, we're actually collecting data on what's taking place under on the ocean floor, reporting it back to our science partners, our universities. And so they're using that information to really track changes to the seabed, changes to erosion that are taking place over time in the communities that we serve. In addition, something that we're currently doing is we've invested in a water testing pilot program. So with that, we're trying to go into places that you can't traditionally test water, places that people are doing recreational activities, kayaking, swimming, fishing, etc., and making sure that that water is safe and letting folks know if that water is safe. Thankfully, only one location has failed so far, so we'll be testing that pretty frequently, but that's something that we're trying to do and making sure that our partners are, on board with sponsoring these initiatives. And again, moving the needle. Something that we're constantly working on is figuring out what else can we do? What infrastructure solutions are there? So these are a few concepts that we're currently trying to figure out how to bring on board with our company. So macroplastic collection at the docks that we're operating in and on our boats, microplastic collection every day that we're operating, but also on the beaches. And so with that, again, I'll wrap it up here, but the way forward really is a collective effort, businesses, the private sector, the public sector working together. But, I'm so proud that in Miami, we're taking we're taking the initiatives to really care together. Events like this happening, like seeing how many people are out here and really supporting Biscayne Bay. It's so nice to see. And I don't know, it's great to be here, really. So with that, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, yep, helpful. Hello, everybody. I'm Anya Freeman. I'm the founder of Kind Design. We are Miami climate tech / construction tech startup. I had a very different life, as Daniel mentioned before I started this. I was originally, hey Raquel, born in Ukraine. I grew up in Israel, and I got the opportunity to come to this incredible country when my dad got a job at the space program. So it's like a very typical Soviet family. My dad's a rocket scientist, and my mom is a gymnastics teacher. And we all showed up here not speaking any English, like not knowing what the cool thing to wear to school is, but feeling so excited about the opportunity of being here. And so then my first rite of passage was, of course, to go to law school to fulfill my parents' American dreams for me. And that's how I ended up in Miami, where Kind Designs is based today, because I got a scholarship to UM Law. And so I graduated, I was working as a lawyer, living in South Beach with my friends. And then I started to notice that we had a major problem with flooding and storm surges and rising sea levels. And what worried me is that there was so much attention on this problem. It was very cool to stand up and talk about it, but the narrative was very doom and gloom. Like, you have to be crazy to buy a house in South Florida. We're all going to be underwater by 2060. And that never made sense to me. And so when I realized that no one else was focusing on applying technology to find solutions to the flooding issue in the city, I thought that I might as well put together a team and together come up with a solution, not only to protect our city, but to make an example for all other coastal cities that are facing the same risks. And so I started researching the space, and I learned that the first line of defense to flooding obviously has always been building seawalls. And this is the first seawall that we put in the water in 1904, so 120 years ago in Galveston, Texas. And it's very similar to the concrete seawalls that we're still putting in the water today. I just don't think it's 12 inches, Raquel. I think it's a little wider. Over regulation now. But very little has changed in this product. And the problem with these seawalls, number one, is they're very expensive for homeowners and for communities. It's a very labor intensive process to make these seawall panels. And number two is that they destroy marine habitats. So one is that traditional concrete panels, they leach chemicals. But number two, just because they're flat, so all the biodiversity, all the sea life that was living by the coast, they can't attach to this flat surface. So they migrate. No one's there to eat the toxins in the water. And the quality of water goes down 45% within 1 year of installing a traditional seawall. And so we start to think, how do we come up with a seawall that's more economic for homeowners, but is also something that's actually nurturing for the underwater ecosystem? And that's how we came up with this idea of 3D printing living seawalls. So the way that seawalls are made now is you see a top right picture here. Mostly construction companies, they make their own concrete slabs. So to lay out all of these molds, each one's like 10 by 10 feet. You need 10 of them, sometimes 100 of them for a project. So it takes up tons of space, very labor intensive. And it takes about a day to make a few molds, and then 3 more weeks to 4 weeks for them to cure before they can be installed. Our seawalls look a little different because we are creating them with a robotic arm. We're 3D printing these concrete slabs. And instead of 24 hours, ours is printed in 1 hour. We have the world's fastest concrete 3D printer. We make a 10 by 10 slab in an hour, and it cures in just a few days. And with all of the environmental and benefits I'll get into, the fact that it functions like a reef, it dissipates wave energy, also collects data with a sensor that we attach, it's still very much price competitive to traditional concrete slabs. So 1 year ago today, I was the only employee. I was working literally from my kitchen, not to be a stereotype, but it was just me. And then a few months later, we were very lucky to have a really successful seed round. We raised $5.6 million from very helpful strategic investors in construction, in government, and Mark Cuban, just because he's awesome. And with that funding, we were able to grow our team to 8. We grew our robots to 3. We installed the world's first 3D printed seawall in February. And we just are now producing an order that's 10 times bigger, 1,300 linear feet for a project in Miami. And the reason we're able to move so quickly is because we have an awesome, badass team. And our COO comes from Icon. They're the biggest company to 3D print houses. Probably you've seen the videos in Austin, Texas. We have an in-house engineer, but all of these other guys, they're literally from Craigslist. Like we have a very different, I think, culture. Like I don't care if you went to Harvard or you didn't even graduate high school. I also don't care if you're a minority or you're an awesome white man. Like all I care about is you're a really hard worker and you're really strong because you have to lift 50 pounds every 30 seconds to operate this robot. So that's what this crew can do. And that's how we've moved so quickly. The way we print, this is our robot in action, this is Arnold and Diego, the guys I'm talking about, is we first print the exterior shell with a robot. We print 1.5 feet per second. It is crazy fast. You're all welcome to come see us. We're 10 minutes away in the Miami River. Then we insert the rebar per the customer specifications. And then we fill the panel with regular traditional concrete. And then we deliver it by barge, because we're on the river, or by truck. And that can be installed by any contractor, whether regular, traditional, a barge, crane. You don't need any special equipment to install our living seawalls in your project. This was a video, but it's a PDF. I'm sorry. You can't, if I press play, you could see the robot in action. If you Google BBC and Kind Designs, they just did a special on us. So that this is where the video came from. So just to say that the technical specifications, by design, our seawalls are identical structurally to regular seawalls. We want to make them as traditional as possible structurally so they can be plugged into a project that's already in permitting because it's the same strength, 5,000 PSI, and it's the same rebar and the same rebar placement, which is really important. But it also has these awesome environmental benefits. So number one, all of our designs are based on biomimicry. So we just mimic local marine habitats. In Florida, of course, it's mangroves. So the wet face, the front of our seawall panels, has the mangrove roots printed in the actual panel. So that allows the seawall to also function like an artificial reef because the roots create caves for sea life to hide from predators. And the rugosity, the special texture of the wall, is great for smaller organisms to attach and hang on when there are waves or a storm. And by the way, this picture was just 4 weeks after installation, which is pretty awesome. Also our material. So again, it's structurally identical to regular concrete. It's 5,000 PSI, but it's also non-toxic. It has no chloride. It has no metals. It's used in artificial reefs and very safe for marine life. It also helps with wave dissipation. This is what we're studying now, because you can imagine instead of the water bouncing off of a flat wall, the roots help dissipate that energy. And finally, we attach sensors to our seawalls to track 15 different water quality parameters, the same parameters that the county already tracks manually by collecting these samples by hand. So this is for you, Albert. All of our ongoing testing with we're working with UM and UF. We're doing, in addition to strength testing, modeling the wave dissipation with the University of Florida, and also modeling the erosion prevention that the seawalls help with. And then FIU is going to our seawalls every 4 weeks and tracking how things are attaching, taking samples, and also using smaller tiles that can actually take it back and put it and test it in their labs. And also next we'll do some carbon sequestration work. So because it's so new, we're trying to collect as much data as possible to make everyone feel as comfortable as possible, to encourage them to substitute traditional toxic seawalls with our living seawalls. This was our very first installation. This was literally the world's first 3D printed seawall. Our customer installed it on 64 in Pine Tree, Miami Beach. If you guys have been, it's a 120-foot seawall. This was the original. On the right was the original specifications of the slab that the customer designed, and this is what we provided on the left. So it's exactly the same, except on the, you can see on the side view, we have the roots on the wet face of the wall. But again, no structural differences. And this is what the project looked like mid installation. He just used a barge and a crane, just like he would with regular slabs. Okay, and these are kind of the incentives we're working on, not just for kind designs, but for living shorelines as a category. Like, how can we incentivize homeowners and make it affordable for them to use alternatives in their seawall projects instead of forcing them, right, to do this? So number one is we're now trying to find a way to create an expedited permitting process for living shorelines, which they have for low-income housing. If you're doing construction on low-income housing, you automatically get reviewed first. It would be awesome if living shoreline projects like living seawalls also had that incentive for homeowners. Instead of 2 years, maybe you can get a permit in 1 or less. We're also doing studies to enable contractors to reduce riprap. When we show that the sea life is attaching and it's helping with dissipate wave energy, that will be a big cost saving for the homeowner. LEED points, if you're building a house over 6,000 square feet, you have to get LEED Gold certified. Well, living seawalls get you points to get there. And then this is a fun one, art in public places. For big construction projects in our county, it's an awesome program. Developers have to contribute 1.5% of their budget towards public art, which is really awesome. So we're working with collaborating with artists to incorporate art into the seawall, because we have also not just the fastest robot, we have the highest resolution robot. The printing layers are so small that we can incorporate incredible designs into the seawall, which can be enjoyed from the public space of the water. So they can count towards the APP. And then the ultimate goal is for living seawalls to be treated like solar panels or like Teslas, where you can actually have tax incentives at the state and federal level. And the other thing we do, we also make reefs and tiles. And these are important because we're zero waste. So all the waste we have between when we're pausing the prints between our living seawalls, we're now putting into molds that we 3D printed and creating these tiles that you can attach to an existing seawall to bring back some life to the area. And it's beautiful because, again, we have this awesome resolution printer. And just to close up, I want to say we've moved as quickly as we have because we are so passionate about transforming and replacing every toxic seawall with literally an artificial reef and making sure that every coastal community in this country is protected and that every at-risk city in the world is saved. Thank you so much.
Do we have time for questions? 5 minutes? Okay. All right. All right. We have 5 minutes for questions, I've been told. So feel free to raise your hand and project.
You'll be helping us with that? But the idea is biocalcification. As sea life attaches, their skeletons remain in the wall, and the skeletons sequester carbon through the biocalcification. It has to be measured through smaller samples that we can actually remove and then test in a lab.
Oh, there's the video. All right. Question in the back.
Yeah, so you can do accelerated studies in the wet lab, like has this awesome lab. It simulates wave and the category 5 hurricane conditions, but it's so expensive at this point. It's totally impossible for us to afford. So what we're doing is meeting all the structural requirements, just like a regular seawall. It has to be 5,000 PSI. It has to have a certain type and spacing of rebar, which takes into consideration storm conditions. We're meeting those exact requirements as a starting point.
Anyone else?
Never. No. Yeah. I am an environmentalist, of course, but I am first a capitalist because I really believe that to scale an environmental solution globally, which is our ambition, you have to have awesome economics and create a product that has a product market fit in a giant market. So from day one, we've really been hyper focused on growing a massive company. And I want to be the first female unicorn in Miami to pave the way for many, many more, especially in the climate tech space.
Go ahead, Albert. I'm happy to start on that one. Good question, Albert. Thank you. So first off, I love to do the reality check, right? When we talk about blue tech in general, it's a very early stage market, right? I mean, we say climate tech is emerging and then blue tech's emerging within that. So a lot of these pathways to innovation haven't even historically existed. And so we are running into the archaic nature of it all, but at the same time, I'd say lever or pressure needed to make that change happen is only just starting, right? We have had very few case studies of a $5 million invested project, right? Saying, hey, you're hurting the local economy by not enabling us to implement these solutions, right? So we need to park those, again, economic drivers, as Anya articulately put earlier, right, to the local government's door, because at the end of the day, at least I'll say in Florida, I feel like if you create the economic pain, then there's a reason. We know the environmental pain, even though we're all passionate about it here, hasn't necessarily moved the needle on policymakers. And so it's the economic driver that I think will make a big difference in showing this is, we are a blue tech hub and only growing in that.
We've had, I think, people may be surprised. We've had a really awesome experience with the government. Durham is actually here. And from day one, I think what helped is that we found common ground. We're not really working against each other. We have the same mission, which is improve the quality of our waters. And I think that really helped in the slide I shared about the incentives that we're creating to encourage homeowners to use living seawalls. Working with someone like Durham, like how they gave me the idea about the expedited permitting, that's already new to low-income housing. How do we create this incentive, but without creating more work for Durham? Because they're already overwhelmed. The demand for seawalls has skyrocketed, right? So it's about finding a way to do it. Yeah, the common ground is really important, and I think we've had good experience because we've been focused on that from the first day.
No, I think it's great. And Anya, I mean, you have the advantage of being a lawyer, so understanding, you know, sort of how the cookie crumbles in the end. Albert, as you know, I just got appointed as economics lead to the Climate Resilience Committee. So actually, Anya's case study here is a perfect example of how do we actually help the rubber meet the road, for as an example, for the rest of the country, if not the world. And one way that we can do that is, for example, I think we do have to have an economics argument to this. Like, number one, I think we can add, for example, a fast track. So, for example, City of Miami has e-permitting, so we could look at passing a resolution. In fact, we should work on this resolution. So I can say anybody that is doing this for the City of Miami should be fast tracked, and let's look at the e-permitting software that's used today in construction and building management to be used to help fast track this. Maybe that helps the county say, okay, well, look how they did it. Now we have an example. So that's one way I think that we could do something, and we should set up that template for other cities to copy. The second is, I think, really enhancing Anya's business case, which is which I think I'd love to get a copy of this presentation, Anya. I love this. I love seeing all the arguments. Obviously, you can add, and we don't know FIU's in the middle of working with this for Korean, and I know the blue carbon will have a value. But how do you pay? For example, we could replace all our seawalls that need to be financed by Miami-Dade County with a blue bond, right? And then if the walls sequester enough carbon and increase marine biodiversity and there's public land, then the county or the city could do a 50-50 carbon credit split with Anya, the investors, and the city for a special like Biscayne Bay Trust or something like that, right? So those are all, I think, different ways that these are all pieces that need to be brought together for this to ultimately work at scale. And luckily, I think we can do that here.
I think from my end, it's a little different, but definitely related. Whenever we have run into any regulatory issues, we try to make sure we're as proactive as possible before it gets to that point. So that's why we have a number of partnerships with local municipalities in coastal cities, not just here in South Florida, but also in St. Pete, Clearwater, where we operate in. So we have MOUs with local universities, with different partners to make sure that we're operating in a way that's, for lack of a better word, kosher, making sure that the things that we're working on do meet regulatory guidelines. And yeah, that's our motto. We try to be as proactive as possible and listen. So if someone has an issue with anything going on in operations, like we do our best to make changes to the way that we run.
All right. With that, we've gotten the message loud and clear. We are not keeping you guys from lunch any longer. Thank you all so much.